Hello and welcome. In this lecture, as you can see here, I've removed all the cards from the widget. And what we're going to be doing is adding them back in entirely programmatically in C++, so that if I go ahead and hit play, you can see there is one card, if it stays focused for long enough, there is one card up there, and it does react like it did before, and it is exactly in the same formation, only we've added it in dynamically, which is what we're going to have to do when we want to load these cards from the file system. So let's dive in and see how we can do this in C++. So we've got to this stage where we've got add painting being called, and we've got a reference to the blueprint stuff going on, the grid painting, which is where ultimately we want to add widgets to. So there's two things we need to understand before we can add a widget. Firstly, how can we create a new widget? And secondly, how can we navigate these grid paintings so that we can add a widget to this grid, painting grid, this grid, uniform grid? How can we add stuff to it? Well, let's have a little look, shall we? So first things first is the create widget. How can we deal with creating a widget? Got some documentation linked, definitely recommend you read through it. But the first one is here in the UMG. Basically, you have got this create widget function that you can just use. And what you have to do is pass in an owning player. You can get this quite easily from within one of these widgets, I think. You can pretty much just do something like get owning player. There you go. Easy as that. So you can do, within this widget, you can easily get the owning player. And then you need to give it the class that you want to spawn. We're going to create a new class for the card, by the way, so we can spawn it. And that's it. What you get back out of it is something of a template type T. And that's got to be, obviously, a parent class of this user widget, or the same class. And then what you do is you go ahead and use that widget. You can add it in to whatever you want to do. So that's easy, fair enough. Now, how about adding in to this grid? So we've got ourselves a grid. And what we would want to do, actually, is not necessarily add anything to the grid, but add it to the size boxes inside the grid, like these buttons have been added as children of the size boxes. So what we want to do is iterate through and find all these size boxes, and then add things as children to the size boxes. How would that work? Well, let's have a look at the uniform grid panel. I'd like to see in here whether there's anything to do with children. Actually, there isn't. Not much. Let's add child to uniform grid. That might be helpful. But there isn't anything much. Why can't I get the children? Because actually that happens in a parent class. In uPanel widget, that's where it happens. So in uPanel widget, you actually have a method called getChildAt, and you can get child at index. You can also look at the other methods that are available on uPanel widget. There's quite a few for manipulating the children. And what you get back is a U widget, a generic widget. So you're going to have to do some casting because you know that it's a size box. And then to add in to the size box, let's have a look at the size box API. Let's see if there's an add in here. Okay, so nothing to add in here again, but let's think about the parent classes. And once again, we notice that the parent class of uSizebox is the panel widget. So you're noticing something, that the panel widget has children. So any of the components that want to have children are children of the panel widget itself, or inherit from the panel widget. Let's not confuse things. So children of a size box can be added using, again, another method of the uPanel widget, which is add child. So this is the API. Obviously, you've got the links here, and you can download it, have a look at them for yourself when you're doing the challenge. But first of all, let's do the creating of the widget together. So first of all, I want to create a card widget that we're actually going to try and spawn, which is going to basically have this button, and that's what we're going to spawn into these size boxes. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going over to the main menu. I'm going to the content browser, basically. Go to add new blueprint class. No, not a blueprint class. Go to add new user interface widget blueprint, and it's going to be WBP underscore, and then we're going to call it the painting grid card, like so. So I can go ahead and open up the painting grid card. Not much here yet. Let's delete the canvas panel, because basically what I want to do is take the button that we've already got as a child of our size box. I'm going to cut it and paste it at the root of our WBP painting grid card. Simple as that. That wasn't very hard at all. Now, I want to also get rid of all the other buttons that are children to these size boxes, because these are what we're going to be populating, and we don't want to get confused as to whether it was there before or whether we've actually populated it. So I'm going to compile and save. Now, we want to actually be able to spawn the widget. So how are we going to go ahead and do that? Well, let's have a look at the documentation. So we're going to just call create widget, basically. So if we've got a painting grid, we're going to go ahead and try and create a widget when we add painting. So it's going to be create widget, like so. Notice it's already in scope because we've included basically the UMG module, and I think this is pretty much included at the root of the UMG module. Now, we don't have a base class for this other than uSerWidget, so that's what we're going to go with. uSerWidget is the base class for create grid. And then the owning game instance is one of the ways you can do it. So there's a few different options. You could do the owning game instance, you could do the uWorld, you could do the player controller. I'm going to go with the world, so get world. And then you can pass in the class. We don't have the class. Whoops. How are we going to deal with this? Well, fairly straightforward. I'm going to comment this out for now so that it compiles. Then I'm going to go over and create a private section, just the same as we always do. We're going to create a uProperty to configure the class. So it's going to be uProperty, and it's going to be edit default only, because I don't want the designer changing at runtime. And then we're going to have, what's the type? It's going to be a T subclass. What's it going to be a T subclass of? The user widget, like so. And then we are going to call this the grid card class, like so. So I can use now that grid card class over in the create widget call, and that will create me a user widget. So I can say user widget, new widget is equal to all of this, equal to the create widget, user widget, etc. Oh, and I need a pointer, of course, because what comes back is a pointer to a new user widget. So that's how we do the creation. We do need to compile this because what I want to do is show you how to configure the card class we're going to spawn. Okay, so that is the compilation done, and it might take longer for you. Pause the video if it does. Usual story. Now we go to our painting grid, which is what we've just added this to. Go to the graph, because we want to edit the blueprint portion essentially of our widget. And then we have a look in the details pane, and you'll notice that in there is where our uProperty has been put, not set yet. So we can go ahead and select from the drop down that we want the WP painting grid card to be the thing that we spawn. Let's compile that, save it, and then the next bit is going to be up to you to actually add this thing to those size boxes, or maybe just the first size box in the first instance. So let's see it in challenge form. So to add the first size box, basically get the first child of the grid, cast it to size box because you know that's what it is. Do check, of course, that you get the right, you get a non-null pointer back, just in case. Add a child to the size box and test that you have one card. Pause the video and have a go at this. Okay, welcome back. So let's give it our best shot. So we've got the new widget to deal with. In fact, I'm going to do an early return here. If we don't have a painting grid, we can just return right out of the painting grid, like so. And then we can easily just carry on. I prefer flat if possible. I don't like lots of nested if statements. And lots of null checks can lead to lots of nested if statements. We want to check that we have been able to create a new widget. It might be possible that we didn't create a new widget, for example, if we had a null class. And I'd rather not check for the null class. I can just check for the null widget instead, which can catch a few more errors as well. So if we've got a null widget, we return also. Now, what's the next step is to get the first child of the painting grid. So the painting grid arrow, we've already null checked it, so that's great. Now, with the painting grid, we're going to go ahead and get child at, and then you can give it an index. Now, this is programmer speak, so your index is going to start from 0. So again, I get the user widget at index 0. And I'm going to cast it right away to a size box. I'm going to have to include the right header for the size box, which is #include. All of these are in components. All these widgets are under components. So we're going to look for the sizebox header, which is fairly straightforward, sizebox.h, and then we can just do a uSizebox cast. So we're getting the widget at 0, casting it to a sizebox, and then we can store it in a variable called the card container, like so. And obviously this is going to be a pointer, that's why it's complaining at me at the moment. Okay, so we've done point 1 and 2, the cast and the get. Now we need to add a child to it. First of all, we should probably check that this wasn't null, so if not, null card container return. And then we can continue with the card container basically and say add child to it, and our child is going to be the new widget, like so. Perfect. So that should just about do the trick of adding the painting. We're calling the painting, creating the painting, or the card basically. We are then getting the container from our grid, painting grid, casting it and adding a child to it. Hopefully that works. Let's dive on into Unreal, hit play and see whether we have got the right thing. It's not playing in VR, let's just check. Oopsie daisies, doesn't look like it's spawning. Let's see whether we've got any errors in the output. Right, so I paused the video and did a thorough review of my code and couldn't figure out what was wrong. So in these cases, it's always best to restart the editor, which is what I've gone ahead and done, and it has actually worked. So sometimes things get a little bit stuck, and there you go. Here we go. It is actually working. What we've got is this card that has been added in completely at runtime by us and in C++. Pats on the back, and let's move on to the next video.